Today, we become legends.
So this is probably one of the worst ideas I've ever had, but I decided I'd do a skill tier list. The reason it's a bad idea is because I'm 100% going to get several dozens of hate comments saying that their god is actually super high skill if I put it in low tier, or saying that a god I put in high tier for skill is actually brain dead. It's going to happen. But I'm a little bit pressed for time on this video and I needed something to do, and a tier list is relatively easy, so that's what we're going to be doing. So it's pretty self-explanatory. If they're placed in a high tier, they're one of the gods that requires like a lot of skill to be successful with, and if they're put in a low tier, they're a god that's completely brain dead and requires no skill. So Achilles, for me, Achilles is like pretty average in terms of skill. Like, the execute does take some skill to use, the 3 is like a little bit skill testing, but overall he doesn't take all too much. I think I'll put him in A tier, like on the kind of upper end of average. Agni, probably the same. I was thinking maybe S tier for Agni, but he doesn't really require too much skill. It's mostly just like making sure you can time the one correctly and making sure you don't aggressive dash and stuff like that. I think A tier is pretty fine. AMC, probably B. AMC in the B tier, as usual. It's like, his ult requires a little bit of skill to hit, and there is hive management, but I feel like really AMC isn't that skill intensive, really. There's an argument you can move him up to A. I'll see who else I put into B, and maybe he'll move up. Arpoash, probably A. While his stuff isn't really that hard to hit, he's one of those low mobility gods that does require some skill to position correctly and actually get good value from him. Anher, probably S. He's not like the most skilled god in the game, but he has a lot of skill shots that are quite difficult to hit. His ultimate's not guaranteed, neither is his jump. Even Impale's not like super guaranteed, and the pillar Impale's obviously pretty mechanically difficult. Using the pillar correctly, knowing when to aggressive jump versus saving it for defensive purposes. There's a lot of skill to Anher. I think S tier is pretty fair for him. Amaterasu, probably A as well. I really like Amaterasu, but she doesn't take all too much skill. She's not a brain dead god, but like, what are you really doing with Amma? You're making sure you're in the correct aura stance, you're making sure you have your passive stacked up on correct targets or objectives. Other than that, there's not too much. I guess you can use the mirror for mitigations and stuff like that, silencing the correct target, but really, Amma doesn't require all too much skill. Anubis, it's either B or A. I know I'm going to get a ton of comments saying Anubis is brain dead and all you have to do is hit a stun and you get a free kill, but one, that stun can be somewhat difficult to hit, and also positioning on Anubis is something you have to worry about, similar to Apwash. I think I'll put him in B though, just because like you can often cheese with lifesteal and things like that. I think B tier is pretty fair. Aokwang, actually thinking about it, there really isn't too much skill involved with Aokwang. I think B is more reasonable for him. Like, what are you really doing? You're using the decoy, like invisibility ability, like correctly. Afro, probably B as well. As much as I would love to put Afro in the trash tier, she really isn't like completely brain dead. You do have to like know when to like just let some damage through and save your ult, and like when to be on the correct target to heal and stuff like that. And like to back off. Like, she does take some skill, I'll give her that. Apollo, managing his ult is a skill in itself. The like instant mez is also like pretty skill testing. You can kind of aggro dash with him and get away with it. I think A tier is pretty fair. He's not quite on the level of Anher in terms of like ADC skill, but he's not on the lower ends, I wouldn't say. Arachne, C. Then again, if Arachne C, who am I putting in D, right? Arachne's one of the most brain dead gods in the game. It's just like, press your steroids, press 3 on someone and run at them, save your ult for running away. Yeah, actually, I think I'll put her in D tier. Like, there's really no god that is more brain dead than Arachne, or like much more brain dead than Arachne. So I think if I put her in C, I'm gonna have no one in D. So I think Arachne has to go in D. Ares, there is some skill to using his 2 correctly. People undervalue how good the 2 is and when you should use it. And then I guess like there's forcing beads for your ult and stuff like that. Hitting chains is like somewhat skill intensive, so I guess I'll put him in A. I was thinking B before, but I think A is fair. Artemis, probably A also. The traps take quite a bit of skill. She's generally like, you've got to maneuver the early game pretty carefully with Artemis to actually get stuff done. I think A tier is pretty fair. Artio is kind of someone that just vomits abilities on people. None of her abilities are difficult to hit in the slightest. And she just has a lot of them, so if you miss one, it's not a big deal. She's kind of a god that you can get into very easily. I think C tier. Athena, she is kind of just like taunt someone, and if your team are decent, you'll win. Like, there is knowing the correct target to ult, but usually that's not too difficult. It's just a target that's getting dived on or whatever, or if like a lane's getting ganked, you want to rotate to it. I think B is pretty fair for Athena. Awilix, probably S. Not only does she have the knock-up gimmick, which requires like quite a lot of precise timing on certain abilities, and obviously she has to hit a 3 from the side or the back to get the like full potential of it, but Feather Step has a lot of implications that are skill testing in terms of dodging abilities and things like that. Sometimes you forgo to 2x damage just so you can dodge like a Vulcan Mava Bomb or whatever like that. Her mobility is pretty unorthodox, which adds skill to her. You can also use her ultimate for just the steroid aspect and forego the pull, like sometimes that's the decision you have to make. I think her Wheelix potentially is bordering on S+, but I think I'll leave her in S for now and we'll see where we place everyone else. Baba Yaga, so one of the gods with the most RNG in the game actually does have like some skill involved. Like, you know, holding the correct potion, using the 3 without getting like interrupted. The ult in itself is like using it at the correct time can be pretty skill intensive. But the RNG does hamper her a little bit. Like sometimes it's just like you roll into the correct potion or the correct line on the 1 and you just kind of win. I think B is pretty fair for Baba Yaga. Bacchus, probably also B. Similar to Athena really, like really you're just belly flopping in. That's the only ability that's difficult to hit in your entire kit. One ability is just basically useless in terms of skill, the 1. And then the 3 is pretty much a guaranteed hit unless they jump. I guess you can like force their jump and then 3, that's a little bit of skill. But like the ult's unmissable, it's just a ton of damage. I think Bacchus maybe even warrants a C tier, but I don't think he's really as brain dead as Artio, so I'll leave him in B for now. Bacchusura, probably C. It's just like power farm up and then similar to Arachne really, you just like vomit on people and then hope you kill them. The reason Bacchus slightly above Arachne is because like sometimes you gotta like power farm early game and like invade and stuff, which does require a little bit of skill. Baron, despite what people are saying at his release, Baron is not a brain dead god. Using his stuff correctly is actually a lot more difficult than you'd think. I think A tier is pretty fine. Like his whole hysteria mechanic, knowing when you have like a correct amount of hysteria to use certain abilities and making sure you get the slow cleanse or the 2 and things like that. And like there's some tricks you can do with the ult where like you pull someone like really far in and kind of keep them there but then switch to a new target and pull them in for the final coffin blow and things like that. So I think he does actually have a lot of skill to him. Baster, probably C as well. The only thing with Baster is knowing when to ult and when you can go all in. Like her abilities are very easy to hit. She has like pretty solid mobility. Her passive doesn't really require any management whatsoever. She's not really very skill intensive. Bologna, probably A. I almost want to put Bologna in S because I think she's more skillful than like Armor and Achilles, but not by too much. Bologna's mostly just about weapon management really. Like you need to be in the correct weapon for the correct time, which is more difficult than you would think. Cabrakan. Cabrakan's actually relatively skillful in my opinion. I think A tier for him probably. Like managing the 3 correctly in laning phases if you're playing solo or support is very important. Knowing when you can blink in for the double stun if like you're playing him in jungle or whatever. And then even the ult itself is like pretty skill intensive. I think Cabrakan could be bordering on a B tier, but I think he's more skillful than like Bacchus, Athena types, so I think A tier is fine. Camazotz. Abilities are actually relatively difficult to hit. If you can't hit lines, you're going to have a bad time on Kama because his main 2 damaging abilities are lines. The ult is like pretty brain dead. I will agree that the ult is pretty brain dead, but I think overall his kit is like pretty skillful. Kurnos. So managing the 1 is something you do have to pay attention to. The thing is the rest of his kit is really like nothing special. So I think I'll put him in B. Like if it wasn't for his 1 adding some like complexity to his kit, I think he'd probably be in like C. Cerberus. The 1 can be difficult to hit with the stun at like long ranges. It's kind of like Kali Lash or something where it's like a weird targeter. And you have to hit all 3 to get the stun, right? So there's that. Other than that, he's not too skillful really. I don't want to put him on the same level as Bacchus though. He definitely takes more skill than Bacchus. But probably less than Ares. I guess I'll just put him in A tier, because he does have the similar mechanic with Ares where like you gotta try and bait beads and stuff before you ult and like ult at the correct time. Chak is very brain dead. Just like press 3 and heal up in the laning phase and then do your 1-2 combo on the wave. Ult if you need to like secure a kill or silence someone or get out or whatever. Chak doesn't... The only thing that's complex about Chak is the like mind games you can play with you throwing your 1 down in one direction and then 2ing in the other direction. Stuff like that. That's the only thing that's skillful about Chak. Changa is kind of just like an ability vomit machine. Like lining up the perfect ult, yeah, that does require skill, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to comment about that, saying like I should place her in S+, because you can get a multi-man stun if you're skillful with her, but oftentimes a multi-man stun is a mistake by the enemy and not super skillful by you. Like if they're grouping up against a Changa as 5 people, it's kind of their fault for being bad, not your fault for being good. But the 2 does require some skill, I guess, and then healing the correct targets and stuff like that, but she really just kind of like vomits abilities on people. I think B's fine. She's probably about the same level as Afro for me. Chernabog. I mean, there's the ult, which is like kind of like Apollo's ult, where like you gotta ult correctly over to fights, similar to Athena and stuff like that. The 3 can also be like kind of skillful, like you can quickly dash into a wall to avoid abilities, dash back out and stuff like that. I think A tier is fine for Chernabog. Chiron is pretty basic in my opinion. I mean, he's got like some abilities. Oops. He's got like some abilities that are pretty difficult to hit, like the ult and stuff, but in reality, Chiron's a pretty easy god. I almost want to put him in C tier, but he's not on the brain dead level of like these gods. He's just like pretty basic. Kronos, kind of hard to navigate the early game with him. His one's pretty difficult skill shot to hit if you don't have setup CC. Why do I keep opening these tiers? But yeah, his one's difficult to hit without the setup CC. His 3 is also quite slow. Choosing the correct circle on the 2 is something, knowing when to ult as well. A lot of Kronos ult too late and end up dying for it, or ult for like no value. I think A tier is fine for Kronos. Cthulhu, so I'm going to get a lot of comments saying Cthulhu's brain dead. He's really not that brain dead to me. Like, he has a lot of abilities to manage and use correctly. He's got to manage the insanity and stuff, make sure he's getting the buffs on his 1 for the damage mitigation. Knowing when to ult as well is pretty important, because once your ult's gone as Cthulhu, you're in a pretty bad spot. I think A tier is pretty fine. Cuchulainn, so his base kit and his rage kit aren't really that difficult, but the rage management is like a really big thing you have to learn with Cuchulainn, and if you're picking him up for the first time, you're not going to be managing rage optimally. You're just going to be like transforming just whenever you get enough rage. I want to put him in S because the rage mechanic is like so difficult to manage, but then there's also like his kit in itself is really quite basic. I think I'll leave him in S. I think the rage mechanic alone deserves an S placement. Cupid, saving up for the heart bomb, making sure the ult lands, kind of skillful. I don't know. Cupid could be B or A in my opinion. Daji, there's a lot of like advanced stuff you can do on Daji, like instant ults, 3s into AA cancelling the 2 for extra damage, like extra single target damage, cancelling the 2 on camp so you can clear faster. I think Daji probably deserves an S tier placement. Discordia, she kind of just like vomits abilities really. There is some skill involved in like getting multi-man madnesses on the 2, but similar to Changa, like if they're grouping up against the Discordia and letting you get those multi-man madnesses, it's kind of their fault. The ult is just like a massive hitbox that you can fire at people. I think B tier is fine. Erlang, so there is like turtle cancelling, but that's kind of it on Erlang in terms of skill. It's really just like pop the 1, run at people, root them to keep them in range, taunt them to keep them in range. Like, turtle cancelling and choosing the correct form of the 3 is really the only thing that makes Erlang, like, skillful, so I think B tier placement. Fafnir? Probably on the upper end of Guardians, just on, like, a base first impression. Using his 2 on the correct target is pretty important. Obviously, using Dragon Form, like, correctly and, like, burning objectives and sieging with Dragon Form 2 is very important. I don't think he's worthy of an S placement, but I think A tier is pretty good for him. Fenrir? Most people probably think Fenrir is, like, super brain dead, and I kind of agree. But I don't think he's like C tier brain dead. There is some stuff you can do with Fenrir. And you got to be careful in certain matchups with Brutalize and things like that. Yeah, I think B tier is fine for Fenrir. Freyja. There's not too much really with Freyja other than like navigating her bad early game. I think B tier for Freyja as well. Ganesha, I think, is one of the more skillful Guardians. Utilizing the silence correctly, the ult is very difficult to like properly use in a team fight. I think A tier. I was going to maybe put him in S, but I don't think he's deserving of an S based on like who I have up there right now. Geb's relatively basic. His movement is a bit unorthodox, which requires some like getting used to. Shielding the correct target is something that even good Geb players don't get right all the time. And then like the ult and the 2 are relatively basic though. I think this is another one that could be A or B for me, but I think A is fine. Guan Yu, you gotta like keep your passive up and stuff like that, but honestly, I feel like Guan doesn't take that much skill, other than like making sure you're healing, and I guess the instant ult cancel. Hachiman, you can aggro dash, which is a very viable strat, and you gotta know when aggro dashing is correct and when it's not. Standing in the flag and stuff, like the extra range autos can be difficult to hit at max range. There's like instant cancelling the ult and stuff like that. I think there's enough stuff in Hachi's kit that elevates him above some of the hunters that I have down in B tier. Hades, very basic. The only thing that's skillful about Hades really is making sure you force a movement ability or something before you ult. But like, if you're taking a shit ton of damage from Hades in your minion wave, that's your fault. That's not him playing well. Like, he's super safe in laning phases because he has like infinite healing. It's just like a super high pressure, I'm never going to lose lane god, but then once you get to late game, I guess like late game it is more difficult to play him, but I don't think he deserves anything higher than B. Hebo, pretty brain dead honestly. As much as I like the character and I enjoy playing him, I'll be the first to admit he's pretty brain dead. You just have the carpet, which is like sometimes, well not even sometimes, the carpet is just generally very important to use correctly, and a lot of Hebo players just like use it willy-nilly, and kind of get punished for it, but the rest of his kit is literally just hit the 3 and you get a guaranteed ult and they're probably dead at that point, or just like spam 1 on people. I think people would be salty at me if I didn't put him in C tier. Hell's one of those gods where like you do have a lot of abilities, so it's not a big deal if you misuse one of them. That tends to be how it is with stand switchers that can just vomit their abilities like this. But like the cleanse is difficult to use correctly. And like positioning on Hell can be difficult because you're often going to be like the key focus for the enemy team. And like navigating around that can be pretty difficult. This is another one that could be B or A in my opinion. It depends how much value you put on the cleanse really. Like Hells that can use the cleanse really well are like pretty significantly better than Hells that can't. So maybe she deserves an A tier. I'll go for A for now. Heimdallr, he has some advanced tech. Placing the 3 correctly, making sure you don't use the 3 and put it on a huge cooldown so that you have your it ready for team fights. Utilizing the vision from the 3, making sure you place them so that you get like a large vision area. There's the instant horn cancel for extra basic attack damage and the knock up. I think honestly A. Probably even upper end of A. People think Heim's brain dead for some reason. He's really not. It's just because he was so overpowered at release that you could play him brain dead and still be successful, but I feel like Heim now is actually a pretty high skill god. Hera, there's quite a lot to manage with Hera, I feel like. A lot of people will say you just put Argus on someone and then GG, but that's not really how the god works, to be honest. Her stuff can be pretty skill testing to hit because she doesn't have any like official lockdown CC outside of a small knock-up in her ult. Like if you hit the 2, the 1's relatively easy to hit but not guaranteed. Utilizing the shield correctly is very important. I think A tier for Hera, honestly. Hercules, so his 3 and his ult are very brain dead, but his 2 and his 1 do take some skill to use correctly. You gotta make sure you're pulling them to like the correct locations. Hitting the Earthbreaker can be pretty difficult. Blink Driving Strike, you can sometimes miss as well. So I think based on like his Earthbreaker and Driving Strike, it'll pull him up to B, but Hercules, I agree, is a relatively brain-dead god. And he's my highest worshipper god, this isn't like a bias from me. Horus, definitely S. Maybe even S+. The thing is, Horus' base kit isn't too difficult to use. The 3 is a little bit janky and something you have to get used to. But it's just the ult, really. Like, using Horus ult correctly is something that I think even Horus mains and pro players still haven't mastered yet. And it's going to take a lot of time, but once there's a Horus player, like in the SPL or whatever, that has properly mastered using his ult correctly and they have the team communication to use it, I think he's an insanely, like, strong god based on skill, so I think S tier. Hu Yi, so there's obviously the triple bounce, but I'm not going to put too much weight on that because usually to play Hu Yi, you don't need to be hitting triple bounces all the time. But like making sure you can hit like single bounces off the wall or quick double bounces in certain spots is definitely something that I value as like a skill. Like whether to instant jump or hover in the air for a bit to bait people out is also something that you can do on Hu Yi that's very important. The ult itself isn't too much other than like stunning people into it for extra damage. I think A tier is pretty fine. He's definitely the upper end of A tier though. Like I would say Hu Yi is more skillful than like Apollo and Chernabog and some of the other hunters that we have in here. But I just don't think he's quite worthy of an S tier placement. Bats, so like, there's air cancelling with the 3, making sure you teleport to the right target, making sure you ult at the correct time because it's on a very long cooldown. I think A tier is pretty fine for home bats. It could probably be B also though. The goddess who shall not be named, really not too skillful. I mean, you have the ult to make sure like... you have to make sure you're using the ult correctly, the silence I guess, but... there's also max range spirit balls. Actually, I think A tier. I was going to put her in B because like she's just early game, you just win the wave clear guaranteed and that's kind of brain dead, but like playing her in the mid to late game, there is some difficult stuff to hit and to manage and things like that. Izanami is either C, maybe even D honestly. I think the only reason she's not D is because her ult takes a bit of skill to use and also like the 3 has a little bit of mind games you can do, but Izanami's super brain dead. She just has like infinite wave clear guaranteed to win the laning phase, which is a lot of the gods down here are just like guaranteed to win laning phase type gods. Janus, I want to put him in S+, dude. I think I'll put him in S for now, but like, Janus is a god that, once again, sort of similar to Horus's ult. I feel like no one's mastered Janus yet. Despite him being out for however long, like 5-6 years, no one's really mastered him, honestly. And that just proves that he's like, he has a super high skill ceiling. Like, getting into Janus is relatively easy, but knowing like when to ult properly, when to aggressive portal versus when to defensive portal, making sure you're in like a good position for your team. There's a lot of stuff you can do with Janus that I feel like people still haven't got a hang of. Jingwei, pretty basic god, honestly. If you get knocked up, you're still safe. If you get poked out of lane, you're still safe. I mean, hitting the 1 can sometimes be a bit difficult, I guess. But honestly, just the fact that she's so safe makes me want to put her in C tier. Like, there's not too much skill involved with playing Jingwei. If you want to learn ADC, she's a very good, like, introductory god. Yom, probably A. Yom's, like, pretty fair. Like, the ult can sometimes be pretty difficult to use, making sure you utilize the pools correctly. Kali late game is incredibly brain dead. It's just, like, select the correct target and win. But Kali early game, like, navigating that early game and making sure you don't get too far behind is actually pretty difficult. So I think similar to Freyja, because, like, Freyja in the late game is pretty brain dead overall. But, like, she does have some struggles in the early game, and you gotta navigate through that. I think Kali deserves B just for that. If we were doing this purely on, like, what they're like late game, Kali will be, like, D tier, because she's so brain dead late game. But, getting to that point does require some skill. Capri, I kind of want to put Capri in S, dude. Like, your main form of CC is putting yourself at risk, being, like, the Capri pull. Like, if you pull at the wrong moment, and you're, like, out of position and your team aren't ready to follow up, you're just going to die as Capri because you put yourself in a really bad spot. I know you can cancel it, but, like, still, you're dashing in and you put yourself in a bad spot for that. The 2's damage mitigation, like, sometimes you want to use that on a teammate and not for damage. A lot of the time, late game, actually, you want to use it on teammates to make sure they get the damage reduction, ulting the correct target as well. But there's a lot of stuff with Capri that is pretty advanced. King Arthur, I know everyone's going to want me to put him in D, but I think he's more skillful than Arachne. Maybe that's my bias for King Arthur coming in a little bit, but, like, a good King Arthur will use his abilities, like, in a sensible way that'll get him, like, the maximum amount of value. You can't just, like, completely button mash and get the max value out of Arthur, which I feel like you kind of can with Arachne. You can just, like, vomit your stuff on someone and you'll get pretty much the maximum amount of the god that you're going to get. Whereas with Arthur, there is, like, a little bit of improvement, you know, maybe 20 to 30% of improvement over just button mashing versus, like, actually thinking about what abilities you're using at what time. Kukulkan, ult's pretty difficult. You also don't have conventional mobility, which does make the god a little more difficult to play. But you do have, like, super good early game wave clear. You're very safe early on. I think I'll put him in B. Kumba, utilizing Kumba's CCs properly to get the max out of them is actually something a lot of people don't do. But, I don't know, Kumba's overall, like, just his abilities are super easy to hit. You're not going to miss Kumba abilities for the most part. But, like, he's not a completely brain-dead character. Kuzomba, probably S. Kuzomba's actually very difficult to use. Like, utilizing Thorns at the correct time, not only for reflect damage, but for refreshing cooldowns on your other abilities. Using the dash, like, to push through waves or into walls to make sure that they're in, like, a stationary position for your team to follow up. There's, like, a lot of stuff you can do on Kuzomba that makes me want to put him above these characters in A tier. Loki, I feel like post-rework Loki is less skillful than pre-rework Loki was. And people are going to be pissed at me for that because everyone's like, oh, pre-rework Loki was just go invisible and one-shot someone. But at, like, a decently high level, pre-rework Loki did take quite a bit of skill. But post-rework Loki is a lot less skillful in my opinion, especially when you play him in solo. Like, the way you play him in solo with the bruiser builds, he's a lot less skillful than he used to be. I might put him in C, honestly. I think I would have put pre-rework Loki in B or A. But after the rework, he just seems like a lot less skillful overall. Maybe it's because they took away, like, his strong burst potential, but, like, patched up some of his weaknesses. I don't know, really. This is a difficult one. I feel like you guys probably want me to put him in C. I kind of want to put him in B. I'll put him in B for now, but I can see the argument for putting him in C as well. Medusa, her dash is very difficult to use, just because it's, like, so trash. I wish they'd fix it, but, her ult as well, she has, like, the turnaround mechanics. Sometimes you can hide behind walls and, like, trick people into looking at you. Overall, she's not massively skillful, though. I think B is probably fine for her. Mercury, there's, like, getting precise ults. There's navigating his early game, which isn't the best. But in general, you just need to hit Merkle, and then you're kind of good. Like, you'll kill people, get Bloodforge, and then just, like, run through people. I don't think he takes too much skill. I think B is fine. Merlin, so he's one of those stand switchers that can kind of just vomit abilities and get away with it, and if he doesn't get max value out of one of his abilities, it's not a big deal because he has, like, 7 more that he can use. But utilizing Merlin's abilities correctly and being in the right stance for the right situation does actually require, like, a good bit of skill. I think A tier is pretty good for Merlin. Mulan, you gotta make sure you're not, like, getting yourself out of position with your ult and things like that, because you are pretty vulnerable when you ult. But overall, Mulan, in my opinion, doesn't take all too much skill. Neith, she's obviously intended as a pretty basic, almost tutorial-style god, but her ult does bring her up. If her ult didn't work the way it does, and, like, there is, like, quite a lot of skill in using Neith ult correctly, I would have put her in C tier. But like her base kit is very much a very brain dead kit. Nemesis, the shield alone makes me want to put her pretty high. Utilizing the shield correctly is another one of those things that I feel like people still haven't mastered yet, despite the god being out for so long. Ulting the correct target as well. The double dash has a little bit of skill to it. I don't think I'm going to put her in S though. I don't think she's quite on the level of the picks up here, but she's probably an upper A tier placement. Neja, getting multi-man ring bounces, like setting that up correctly and baiting people into doing it can be pretty skill intensive. But overall, like, does he really require that much skill other than like hitting your ult? Like, I guess that's hitting raw Neja ults, that does require quite a lot of skill. I think B though. Nike, not really too skillful, honestly. If you're building a full damage in jungle, she's a little more skillful, but from solo, it's just like, you have a second HP bar basically, and you just pop thorns and kind of run at people. Using the 2 correctly is like what brings her up slightly. But overall, not too skillful really. Nox, S tier. Despite how much I hate Nox, I'm sure all you guys do too, you can't admit, you can't say she doesn't require skill basically. Hitting that 2-1 combo takes a lot of practice. A person that's just started picking up Nox is going to hit it way less than like a true Nox main. Using the dash correctly also, like you can double dash through things and get like 2x damage on that. The ult, using it for the mitigations, not just for the damage. There's a lot of stuff that is pretty skillful on Nox. Nuwa, obviously her ult is like pretty much 0 skill, but like good Nuwas will use it for visibility and safety and stuff like that. And then like the 2-3 combo can be pretty difficult because she has no true setup CC for it unless she's using her passive really well, which actually does require some skill. On initial thoughts, I was going to put Nuwa lower down, but I think actually B or maybe even A is fine for her. She does actually require some skill. She's one of those gods with like a really low skill floor. You can get into Nuwa super easily, but to maximize her, she actually does take quite a lot. Odin, very brain dead. Odin's just like, you have infinite shields, you just stun people, you have like jumps and stuff like that, you can bring people in, he's like super safe. And there's really not anything in his kit aside from using the 3 for like attack speed on objectives, which a lot of people don't do. People just like fully charge it on objectives because it's more damage, but like you'll get more overall damage by giving your carries attack speed on objectives, so you gotta make sure you use the 1 stage 3, not the 3 stage 3 on objectives. But other than that, there's really not much to Odin, to be honest. Olaron, no conventional mobility makes him pretty difficult. Also, using the ult correctly, there's like a ton of situations where like you might want to use the ult, but sometimes you might want to hold off for it for a better time. Using his 1 at the max range, somewhat difficult skill shot. Overall, pretty like on the upper end. Osiris, I don't see the argument for Osiris being super skillful. Hitting his ult can be difficult. But you can wait for the stun on the tether, or you can slow them for that. It's not insanely hard, and he's really just like a vomit abilities on people type god, and just like be super tanky with mitigations. Honestly, Osiris maybe should be down in C tier, but I don't think he's quite as bad as some of the gods down here, really. Pele, managing your passive is quite difficult. There's the 3 as well, utilizing the 3 properly. I don't know, I think Pele's either an A or a B. You could probably pick and choose here. I think I'll leave her in A for now. Persephone, S. She's one of those gods that like if there was gonna be an S+, she'd probably be one of them. Managing the plants is just insanely difficult. Her mobility isn't the best. Hitting long range ults actually is quite difficult. I know people are going to be salty at me for putting her in like a high skill category because people are like really don't like playing against her, but the difference between like a beginner or an intermediate Persephone and someone that truly knows the god like Paul or whatever from SPL, it's a huge difference. Poseidon, very brain dead. He's just like cracking people, get killed. If they Aegis or something, you kind of cry. There's not much else to Poseidon really. Ra, probably A. Utilizing his healing correctly is, to be fair, also on your team. Your team have to be ready to like utilize Ra heal, but like utilizing it yourself also. And then obviously his 1 is ult just like relatively difficult to hit with no proper setup CC. Raijin, probably on the similar level to Ra. His 3 is a bit janky and weird, you have to get used to it. Hitting the like ult and choosing the correct thing for the ult, like whether you want to taunt, fear, or do full damage, there's some skill to that. Rama, probably similar to Ra actually, in that like his ultimate is super difficult to hit, and that's the main reason he's up here. Rat, so Rat's base kit is pretty mediocre. The Acorns do like add some skill to his kit, I guess. But overall, like, what are you really doing on Rat that's like a super difficult high execution thing? Not much, to be honest. Raven, probably A. Is 2, using it at the correct time, similar to Changa in a way, is like very difficult to do. Ulting the correct target as well is definitely missable if you don't hit it off of a CC. Scylla, probably A also. Like, making sure you hit that one. Like, once she gets to late game, she's not too difficult to play. Her mobility is a little sketchy because it takes about a half second to a second to actually come out versus like a lot of other mobilities that are pretty instant. But also similar to like a Kali or whatever, Scylla has to navigate a very bad early game and play pretty safe and careful early on, which is a skill in itself. Serket, so she can play 2 different roles, which is 2 different play styles. I guess if you count that. She could be like pretty difficult. Hitting the double madness obviously is very difficult. It's somewhat like Discordia, where the enemy team have to be playing a bit weird for you to actually get that, but with Serket it's even more difficult because it's 2 different line projectiles that you have to hit on 2 gods, and they have to be close to each other. Like, it's kind of insane. She does have very high mobility, which makes her a bit easier to do. I think A tier is... There's a lot of stuff on Serket that's pretty brain dead, but then there's also a lot of stuff that takes a lot of skill, so I think she probably averages out to like an A tier. Set is S tier. This is just proven by the fact that he's one of the best gods in the game, if not the best god in the game right now, and there's still not a lot of people playing him with much success in like lower ranks. He really does take a lot of skill to like completely maximize. Skadi, brain dead as hell. Just press 2 on someone, ult, and then just like keep basic attacking them basically. The only thing that's like a tiny bit of skill is like utilizing the 3. If you see someone like taking steps towards you, you can 3 and sort of like push them into you. Or into your tower or something. That's like a little bit of skill, but other than that, there's not much with Skadi really. Sobek, similar to Skadi, honestly, you need to be able to hit the pluck with Sobek, that's literally it. Everything else about the god is incredibly brain dead. And once again, this is not a bias because I really enjoy playing Sobek, but really, if you can hit the pluck, you can play Sobek. It's that simple. Sol, her ult can be pretty difficult to like, because it requires some prediction to line up and stuff like that. The 3 is pretty unconventional. You got to use it sort of in anticipation of some damage, not like as the damage comes out, like most mobility abilities. Maintaining heat is also pretty difficult. I think I'm going to put her in A, honestly. Wukong, I want to put him in C, but I think I'll put him in B. It's like a lower B, just because like choosing the correct form of 72 transformations can be pretty difficult sometimes. And similar to Kronos, there is a wind up on his ult, so you can't just use it immediately to get out of danger. You have to use it a little bit preemptively. But Wukong is like one of the safest and easiest gods to play. Susanoo, people probably gonna have a go at me for putting this guy a little bit higher up, but he has some pretty complex AA cancelling. Using the 3 correctly can be pretty difficult. Charging up the ult and stuff like that. You could argue he's B, but I wouldn't say he's any lower than B. A lot of people will be like, oh, screw Susanoo, put him in D tier, but I think he does actually require some skill. Sylvanas, positioning on Sylvanas is something that a lot of people struggle with. He's very slow, doesn't have a way to really get people off him other than ulting, which a lot of times you don't want to do. No traditional mobility, so like positioning on Sylvanas can be very difficult. There's also the pulls. Hitting the pulls like without setup is very difficult to do. Terra, using Terra's ult correctly is just very difficult to do, honestly. Like maximizing the value of Terra ult is something you have to really work at. Sometimes you can like delay hits on like the 2 or the 3 or whatever. That's like a little bit of skill there. Thana, kind of similar to Sobek. If you can hit Death Sight, you can probably play Thana, but there is a little bit more to him than Sobek. Like, playing Thana late game can actually be a little bit skill testing. It's more so like you're playing around executes and stuff, and you have to be a little more careful. Morrigan, should I put her in S+? Like, Morrigan's base kit is pretty easy to use, but obviously there's the ult where, like, you need to know many characters. I guess depending on how you look at it and how much value you place on her ult, she could be like S or S+. I think I'll put her in S+, honestly. She may be the only S+ god because you have to learn, like, pretty much every god in the game to truly maximize the value that Morrigan can bring. Or at the very least, you need to know 9 different gods, or 10 different gods if you include Morrigan, to play her properly and optimally in like any given game. I feel like someone that was new to the game picking up Morrigan would have a real hard time because they wouldn't have a clue what to do. Like, even transforming into the correct target, because obviously it takes your ability levels from yourself. So like if you're leveling the 2 on Mori, you need to ult into a god that also levels their 2 as their first ability, and a new player isn't going to know that. So I think S+ is pretty fine for her. Thor, probably A. Like, hitting double taps raw is very difficult. The ult is missable, actually. People think it's just like, if you miss Thor ult, you garbage at the game, but it is one of the more missable assassin ults in the game. There's a bit of AA cancelling you can do. The full Thor combo is like, it's not super skill intensive. A lot of like combos in Smite really aren't, but it does take a little bit of execution. Thoth, you gotta watch your aggro dashes on Thoth. A lot of new players to Thoth just aggro dash for extra damage and they get punished for it. You gotta make sure basically Thoth is just positioning and hitting lines. Those are the only two things that's skillful about him, really. But like, if you can't do either of those two things, if you can't have good positioning and if you can't hit lines, you just straight up cannot play Thoth. So I think A tier is pretty fine. Tsukuyomi, once again, another very overpowered recent release that people are going to complain at me for putting higher than D tier. But I think Suku's either like an A or a B. I'm going to put him in A for now. Like, there's some skill on the 3, some skill on the 1, making sure you use the basic attacks correctly. The ult is actually very difficult to use, despite what most people would think. Like, you need to make sure your last beam hits, like, the correct target at the final time to make sure you land in the correct location to, like, finish off a kill or escape from the fight afterwards, because he has no, like, defensive mobility, really, to speak of. Like, his only mobility is his ult, and that's, like, for going in, not for getting out. So, you do have to, like, play Tsukuyomi quite differently to a lot of other assassins. Tier is just basically being able to hit Fearless. He's very safe in the laning phase because of infinite healing. I wouldn't say Tier requires too much skill. Ula, probably A. A lot of people are going to say Ula should be S or S+. But really, with Ula, like, the only skill is hitting the axe, to be honest. Like, yeah, sometimes you use the 1 and the 3 raw, which can be quite difficult to hit, which is why he's, like, still A tier. But really, if you hit the axe with Ula, you get the full 3-1 combo with probably some basic attacks weaved in there as well. It's not like you have to actually do extra stuff on top of hitting the axe. It's if you hit the axe, you've got the full combo, basically. It requires a little bit of mechanical execution, but it's not too bad. The mana, actually kind of difficult, honestly. Like, making sure you ult and don't just get, like, someone jumping and running away from you, that takes a bit of getting used to. There's, like, the instant dash cancels for knockups to get extra basic attacks in and stuff like that. Overall, a relatively difficult god, but not, like, super difficult. Vulcan, definitely A. Arguably even S. Vulcan is one of the more skillful mages, in my opinion. Like, a lot of his stuff is very difficult to hit. Like, the ult under 3, the 1 even from, like, a high range can be difficult. Obviously, the turret is pretty basic, but other than that, like, Vulcan tends to, like, you need a lot of mechanical skills, like, and a lot of practice to properly hit Vulcan stuff. Xbalanque, very basic, honestly. You gotta know when to ult at the right time, I guess. Sometimes you can ult when, like, you don't need it, but your team need it for a team fight or whatever. That's mostly the only skill involved in him. I guess there's, like, boulder management, but that's kind of it, really. Xingqian, probably A tier. Similar to a lot of those Guardians where, like, you need to force beads for the ult. That's pretty important. But you're really not having trouble hitting a lot of Xingqian's abilities, and there's not too much, like, advanced stuff you can do with him, really. Yamoja, I think Yamoja's on a similar level to Persephone, so I will put them in S, but I think there's definitely an argument for moving both of these two up to S+. It's just another one of those things where, like, similar to Set and Persephone, she's one of the strongest gods, if not the strongest guardian in the game, and yet people still, like, feed with her in low ranks because they don't know how to play her. That just proves to me that, like, the god is very skill intensive. If, like, they're the best god in the game, but most people can't even make her work above, like, an A tier level. You know what, I think retroactively I'm going to move Yamoja, Persephone up to S+. And then I think, like, also Janus and Set are, like, bordering on S+, but I don't think I would quite put them up there. I think this is more fair. Obviously, of the S+'s, I think Morrigan is the most difficult one, but, like, these two, it just, their win rate stats alone, like, the fact that they're super successful in high ranks and everyone rates them very highly on tier lists, but people in, like, low to mid ranks just can't make use of them very effectively, that just proves they're very skillful. Ymir, pretty basic. I mean, there's the walls. The walls bring him up a little bit. Like, making sure you utilize Ymir walls correctly is actually very difficult. But other than his wall, his kit is pretty basic. It's designed to be basic. Zeus, he's a very brain-dead god in terms of actual ability usage, but the reason he's above C tier is because positioning. Like, positioning on Zeus is everything. If you go onto Zeus and play him like you would play, like, high mobility mage, you're just gonna really have a bad time with him. Which is why he's slightly above some of these gods in C tier. And then Zhonghui, I think probably A for Zhonghui. A is probably fine. And that's the tier list. Just zoom out to make sure we get the full thing on the screen there. So we got, like, the least skillful god in the game, in my opinion, is Arachne. Probably a lot of people expected and agree with that one. The top end as well, Persephone, Yamoja, Morrigan. Probably a lot of people agree with that too. I think the disagreement will come in more so in, like, the mid tiers. Like, I think there'll definitely be some people that argue, like, Jingwei shouldn't be down here, or maybe Izanami shouldn't be down here. Or that, like, Daji shouldn't be up here, or, like, Capri shouldn't be up here, Kuzomba, whatever. There will definitely be some disagreement, but this is what I think overall. Keep in mind, I didn't take too much time on this tier list. It was kind of just like a spur of the moment thing because I needed a video to make for today. If I was truly thinking about everything and everything they can do properly, I'm sure some placements would change. I'm not going to be 100% right on all of this. But yeah, this is more so just meant for fun. It's not meant to be like a completely definitive tier list that you're not allowed to disagree with. It's perfectly fine if you disagree with some things, and let me know those down below so I can sort of change my opinions, because I'm sure some of these were sort of hasty placements that definitely could have changed. Like I said, throughout a lot of the tier list, I was saying, like, this could be B, this could be A, this could be S. Like, a lot of them could have changed. But overall, this is a good general overview of what I think in terms of actual skill level of the characters, and I think for the most part, it's relatively accurate. But yeah, that's it from me. If you want to see any other tier list videos, definitely leave those suggestions down below or in the Discord, in the video ideas channel. And I'll catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.